Okay, guys, I apologize in advance because I got Crockett, who is a whiner. But first we're going to start reading to Roscoe. Hi, Roscoe. Why don't you sit down and enjoy the story? Okay, they'll settle down here in just a minute. We're back here at the shelter. This is Roscoe. He's one of our shelter dogs. He's available for adoption. He's a good boy. All right, we're on part 2, chapter 11, Getting to Work. Plans began and the work changed from publicity to reality. There were several months before the next hurricane season, and many of the Gulf states were eager to get something started. There was a lot to do. Amy and Jim moved to Baton Rouge. It was time for the work to begin. Amy fell into a routine as Jim continued his classes locally, making several trips back to Boston to visit his family. Bob also moved to Baton Rouge near the site and continued his weekly article, keeping all of America up to date on the pipeline's progress. The majority of the local people there were in favor of the pipeline. They'd been ravaged by hurricanes year after year. There were a lot of people willing to work, and with Houston, Texas not far away, and in desperate need of water, the task of connecting the two areas actually seemed like it could be done in a reasonable time frame, and it would be an excellent test to see if the pipeline would really work. She asked the local governments to help her find laborers. They were able to find enough people who were out of work and willing to come on. They would be able to make more money working on the pipeline than they were getting from the government. The labor force was local, so she didn't need to arrange any housing for them. The prison system carefully chose 200 men and women they deemed suitable for a trial run to see if it would work out. These were people who didn't commit any violent crimes. They weren't repeat offenders, and they did not get into any trouble after they were in prison. Their pay would be the same as the other unskilled laborers. This was a test run. They decided that these people would work on this job until it was completed, and then they would report to the parole board to see whether they were considered reformed or go back to complete their term. If they caused any problems, they were sent straight back to prison. The consensus was that they would be better off and more easily reformed if they didn't have to go back to the prison at night and could stay on the job site. It was decided that 4 guards would be in charge of watching over them. The warden and local prosecutors wanted the guards to be armed. This was a point of contention between Amy and the authorities. She actually won out. She had a strict no firearms policy, and that included the guards. That's how she won the argument. But her real reason was that she wouldn't like to have someone with a gun watching over her. She didn't think her employees would like that either. She appealed to the federal government for additional funds to create temporary housing for the reformers. She didn't like referring to them as the prisoners, so they had to make do with the she appealed to the so they had to make do with the funding that she was working with. Anyway, I guess I skipped the part where she didn't get approved for more additional funding. They contacted FEMA for help. They were happy to oblige. They built temporary FEMA housing that they referred to as probationary housing for the reformers, complete with a cafeteria, shower rooms, and a laundry. It turned out that the probationary housing was also needed for other work. Many men and women wanted to work but didn't have transportation to get there and back every day. This was something that Amy had not foreseen, but it was a happy coincidence that they could stay on site if they needed to. Things were coming together. She hired a great foreman named Sal. Remember Sal? He was in the beginning, The Reasons, chapter 2 or 3. She hired a great foreman named Sal. He was laid off from his company in Detroit. He came down and signed on right away. Amy was impressed by his tenacity. He made the effort to meet her in person, and he held out. He told her he told her about his leadership skills. She decided to give him a chance. It was a good decision. Sal could handle anything she threw at him and had a good rapport with the laborers. Everyone liked him. He quickly became her right arm. She knew he had a wife and kids up in Detroit. Amy also knew that he sent his paycheck to her because he asked her if he could live in the probationary housing. He kept only what he needed and sent the rest home to his family. Amy, of course, allowed him to. Sometimes his wife would call and Amy could overhear some of the conversations. It seemed like he and his wife had some issues, but he was really trying. Amy could see it, and she hoped that someday Sal's wife would come to see it too. The three there were three main tasks at hand. She would need a crew in charge of creating the drainage ditches, one in charge of creating the reservoirs, and one in charge of the pipeline itself. There were permits, surveys, inspections, designs, layouts, hiring, and more. She was excited but overwhelmed at the same time. I really could use Ben here, she found herself often thinking. Amy put Sal in charge of overseeing the three major projects. He would be the head honcho, so to speak. He was one step below her in the chain of command. As work progressed, the biggest issues were the drainage ditches. In spite of the fact that this work was being done in order to take floodwater away from residential areas and direct it to the reservoirs, it would seem the people of Baton Rouge weren't too happy about the work being done on their streets and the congestion it resulted in. The good thing was that they were moving along quickly, and the cooperation of local authorities helped with the speedy progress. They all knew that hurricane season was fast approaching. The ponds and reservoirs were another issue. Where to put them? The ponds couldn't be too far outside of town, and they had to be placed strategically to where they could be piped to a reservoir. Eminent domain was necessary in many cases, and some people were not initially thrilled with it. However, once they were shown plans and could see the beautiful recreational areas they would have in their backyards, they were mostly happy. The ponds were especially designed so that they wouldn't hold all the water. Instead, they were designed to let some of the water seep through and into the ground below them. Trees and grasses would be planted around the new ponds and reservoirs to absorb and hold even more water. The idea behind the reservoir system was to hold and preserve some of the water so for the area to use in the future, if in need. The ponds were to restore the groundwater. What good would it do to transfer all of the water to another area only to send it back to that area if that area experienced a drought? And another issue was the original plan intended to have one reservoir, at least 3 runoff ponds in every county, depending on the size and scope of the residential areas and the average amount of rainfall in that area. That wouldn't be possible because of the time frame they were working with. They could only do one reservoir for 3 runoff ponds, but in 3 runoff ponds in the most populated and flood-prone areas for now. But it was becoming more and more apparent that this project was long-term, and it worked, and if it worked and saved the federal government the amount of money it was expected to, both in disaster relief and in government and state aid, this could keep a lot of people employed for a very long time, and that was a good thing. The pipeline was actually the easiest stage because the areas where it was going to be built would be restored to look like it was before the pipeline was put in place. The disruption was merely temporary. Bob was, of course, always on hand documenting the progress, the problems, the small successes, and the failures. The relationship between Bob and Amy got better. They realized over time that they were very much alike. They were both all about business, less about small talk and BS. Initially, it caused some tension, but as they worked together, they gained respect and admiration for one another. They were both very good at what they did. They had to admire that. Bob suggested that Amy call in an economist to do some research so he could report the real numbers in his article now that the actual work was being done. Amy agreed. After about a week, the gentleman returned with his results. They were preliminary, of course. The real financial results wouldn't be available until they knew it would work. He reported that unemployment in the area had dropped drastically. Louisiana had elected not to require people who were on welfare to go to work on the pipeline, as some states said that they would. However, unemployment dropped from 7.2% to 3.5%, an unprecedented decline. The area also saw a difference in poverty rate, decreasing from 20% in poverty, decreasing from 20% of the population to 12. The positive effects on the local economy have been astounding. Bob was all too eager to print the results. Amy asked the economist to broaden his research based on the results from the area. She wanted to know more. The group had made a commitment back in the beginning only to use materials made in the U.S. She knew that a steel mill in Allentown, Pennsylvania had reopened to fill the needs for the pipeline. Factories that make parts for equipment were at the ready once the project expanded. She wanted to know what were they looking at? How big was this going to be? The Economist had already reported an increase in retail sales in the Baton Rouge area. Car sales, restaurants, home improvements, etc. Daycare centers opened up, and the pipeline employees with children were offered a daycare bonus to help them afford the additional cost. Amy hoped the pipeline itself would have child care centers on site for employees to use in the future, but that was on the table for another day. It took several weeks for the economists returned to Amy with the results. After taking into account the drop in unemployment between factories opening up and increasing production, daycare centers, and recreational areas, not to mention the pipeline itself, the reduction in federal disaster aid, the reduction in food stamps and welfare, the increase in retail sales, after all the results were more than she could have ever hoped for. The increase to the state and local and federal governments combined was in the billions. The new report was submitted to Congress with a request for more funding. Now don't forget, Congress has still got Global Water Corp in their pockets. As a result, there were times when Amy and Jim were more like strangers than lovers. Sometimes they wouldn't see each other for weeks, and even if they did, the talk was more about the pipeline than anything else. She was a machine, driven by desire to make this project work no matter what. She was excited and charged at the possibilities of the things to come. She knew once the Baton Rouge Houston project was complete, assuming it was a success, it would take on a life of its own. She wouldn't need to take such an integral part in it, but for now, she was tired and lonely. Sometimes she asked herself what the hell she was doing and how she got herself into this after all. Don't we all? Then one day she received a letter. It was from the mother of a local boy who had recently gotten into trouble with the law. The letter explained to Amy what happened to her son and that the judge decided to send her boy Teddy to work on the pipeline instead of staying in prison. The mother went on to say that her son calls her every week and tells her how much he likes it and what his plans are after his time is over there. He hopes to stay on the pipeline and continue that sort of work elsewhere, He said that he had finished his high school credits and was beginning to take some college classes, and he was doing very well. She thanked Amy and wanted her to know that she believed that Amy had saved her son's life by giving him a second chance. Amy sat down and immediately wrote her back. She thanked her for sharing her story as well. She explained that it had not been easy to get there, and she was so happy to hear the mother's touching story. The letter came just when Amy needed it most. It breathed new life and hope into her. She felt stronger and more determined than ever. As the months passed, you know who that was, right? Teddy, and from the beginning too, like Sal. As the months passed, Congress did not say anything about the budget increase she requested. She wasn't surprised. Work went on without a hitch. Amy continued her work diligently, and Jim continued his classes locally, but his trips home to Boston became increasingly more frequent. Back in New York, two men meet in a dark alley. I thought we had an agreement, Mr. Thompson snarled. I helped you. What more do you want from me? You and your people couldn't buy Congress. You couldn't buy the media. And I'm not helping you anymore. He snapped back. Why don't you just accept it? You lost. Because, he said like a snake, slithering out his words, so angry his teeth were clenched together, I never lose. I tried to handle this in a gentlemanly fashion. Now I'm telling you, I want this pipeline stopped, whatever it takes. Maybe you would prefer if I handled this myself. That means our arrangement ends, and your friends will know everything you did, and they'll be the lucky ones. Because you see, son, I have a lot riding on this, and so do you. I can either make your future very comfortable or very uncomfortable, because you better believe I will leave a trail of breadcrumbs that will lead straight to you. He sat looking at the sky and the trash cans and the dumpsters in the alley, looking for an answer. If I help you, nobody gets hurt. You have my word, he replied with an evil grin. All right, next chapter 12. We're going to put Roscoe up. Oh my goodness, just look at that cute baby. You ready to go back in your bed and let somebody else have story time? Mm-hmm. You love story time? You love story time, don't you? They love story time. Come on, let's go back in bed.